Night, night. Thank you.
As a crazy Warriors fan, that was one of my favorite moments in convention history ever, and the crowd seemed to like it. Coach Kerr brought the house down, but the Democrats didn't stop there. Not by a long shot. Enter Hillary Rodham Clinton.
It is no surprise, is it, that he is lying about Kamala's record. He's mocking her name and her laugh. Sounds familiar. But we have him on the run now. We have to fight for Kamala as she will fight for us. Because you know what? It still takes a village to raise a family, heal a country, and win a campaign.
It was a speech for the ages from Hillary Clinton, but for all that night one offered, no moment felt more emotional or important or maybe unifying and meaningful than President Joe Biden's. He so unselfishly paved the way for this entire week to happen. Here's a bit of his keynote address.
We're facing an inflection point, one of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine the fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. That's not hyperbole, I mean it literally. We're in a battle for the very soul of America. The work and prayers of centuries have brought us to this day. What shall our legacy be? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you.
In a matter of hours, DNC delegates will hold a ceremonial roll call vote to make Vice President Kamala Harris officially the party's nominee. She, along with her running mate, Tim Walz, have a rally in Milwaukee tonight, but it will be Chicago that will once again be the center of the political universe tonight. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends, all of them out in Chicago for us today. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memley is back, plus former U.S. Senator and co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast. Our friend Claire McCaskill's back. And host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, the Reverend Al Sharpton, is with us. Mike Memley, this was Joe Biden's night, and this was Joe Biden's room. I've never felt anything more than I felt the applause. And I know there's some clocks in around 4 minutes. It felt even longer than that. And he seemed genuinely moved by it. Just take me inside the room in those moments.
Yeah, yesterday was about quite a bit of emotion, the energy with which Democrats feel now about this campaign, coming into this convention, wanting to be together to celebrate where they are now, but also wanting to pay tribute to President Biden, to honor his service after what had been a very difficult series of weeks. And I saw on President Biden a range of emotions. One was pride in the accomplishments of what he's been able to do and really relishing the opportunity to celebrate that with a room full of excited Democrats. The question I was asking ahead of his remarks yesterday, Nicolle, was would the emotion of the room get to him? Would the energy and the enthusiasm of the crowd, the love for him, move him? It really was his daughter that took his breath away, that brought him to tears. And I thought one of the most significant parts of her remarks was making that linkage of Beau Biden to Kamala Harris. It was Beau Biden who was the way in which President Biden first got to know Kamala Harris. They worked together as attorneys general him in Delaware, her in California, on some important cross-state cases. And as Ashley Biden shared, Beau told his father, keep an eye on her. And ultimately, she was who he took into the White House with him as his running mate. That was the connection that was really celebrated last night as President Biden talked about the work that they did together, but then turned to the importance of this election. The stakes, what is at risk if Donald Trump were to return to the White House. And you saw a blueprint for how this president will continue to campaign for the Democratic ticket in the fall, making it clear that he thinks all Democrats, all independents and Republicans have to do their part to make sure Donald Trump is kept out of the White House.
Claire, it struck me last night watching this that this wouldn't have worked any other way. It would not have worked if he had not passed the torch to someone who loves him as openly and as faithfully as Kamala Harris does. It wouldn't have worked. You wouldn't have seen Ashley Biden give that speech. You wouldn't have had that moment Mike Memley just talked about. I don't think you would have seen Jill Biden give that speech. It just reminds me that politics and what we're watching, which I have been on the other side, the campaign that would go on to lose, running against a man, a fantastic candidate, as well as a political movement, and that was the 2008 Obama candidacy. But the movement only happens because of all these stars lining up. It, of course, only happens because of Joe Biden's decision to pass the torch. But it only creates this movement and this political phenomenon because he passed it to someone who always had his back, who was never among those who thought that he should step off the ticket. He decides to endorse her, some 25 minutes after he announces his decision to get off the ticket. And those two people are what sort of cast this political lightning down here on Earth, which is this thing that felt like it's been caught in a bottle there in Chicago. Is that what you feel there? That's what it looks like from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that went on in those just really rough days after July 21st, really what was going on, people were underestimating Kamala, but in many ways, if you step back, they were disrespecting Joe Biden by saying it needed to be an open convention and people needed to compete for it. It was two things. It was underestimating her, but then also saying, well, we don't really have confidence Joe Biden picked the right vice president. And so when he said definitively it is Kamala Harris, then that was really a moment where there's no way the party was going to disrespect his choice, given what he had just done to sacrifice himself for the good of the country and our party's values. So it really was a perfect way to galvanize this movement, and I do think it will become a movement if it's not obvious already. I think this is not just echoes of 2008. It's becoming a drumbeat of 2008, and I think we're going to see that continue to grow.
Rev, this shot that I have on the screen right now, I don't know if you can see it. It's when Vice President Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff come down and embrace President Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden. And what I understand from reporters on the ground, they say to each other is she says, "You made me cry." And they tell each other they love each other. I mean, this idea that the campaign is joyful is true, but it's also true that underneath, a joyful and upbeat demeanor is just genuine love and admiration and affection for one another, for the agenda that she's running on, the Biden-Harris agenda, and for everything that Claire's talking about, this political powerhouse in Kamala Harris who's been underestimated every step of the way.
No doubt about it. I was very moved by it, but not surprised, because every time I've visited the White House and had meetings with the president, usually the vice president was there, you would sense a real sense of of closeness and affection between the two of them. And I think that it was demonstrated on the stage last night. But any of us that have been in countless meetings with them over issues, we always saw it. And I think it was that kind of bonding that they had, that synergy that they created, which made him clearly able to be at peace with stepping aside and endorsing her. I think if it had been someone he did not trust as much, not only with his own personal relationship, but with the handling of the country, and that was lockstep with the things he represented, it would have been a more difficult, if at all possible, decision. But he knows that they are in lockstep with each other in terms of policies and in terms of how they feel about this country. And I think that made it easier for him to make one of the most difficult decisions we've seen a United States president make.
Let me show you, Mike Memley, some of what the vice president had to say last night about unity.
Looking out at everyone tonight, I see the beauty of our great nation. People from every corner of our country and every walk of life are here, united by our shared vision for the future of our country. And this November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward. With optimism, hope, and faith, so guided by our love of country, knowing we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Let us fight for the ideals we hold dear, and let us always remember, when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Good night, everyone.
Does a message matter? If this convention succeeds in doing the two things she did there, grabbing the mantle of love of country and patriotism, and that of fighting and being a fighter, it will, by every objective measure of a convention's success, be one.
Well, Nicolle, as Democrats were organizing this convention, obviously with a different nominee in mind initially, but now with Kamala Harris leading the ticket, they've been very mindful of the obligation that Democrats have an extra challenge every 4 years. First, they have to unify their own party. Democrats are a party of multiple different coalitions that don't always agree with one another, and one of the imperatives of these conventions every 4 years is showing that they are agreeing on much more than they disagree on, and we'll see that again with Bernie Sanders tonight, making the progressive endorsement, as we saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing last night. But one of the things that continues to mystify now the Harris campaign leadership is the way in which Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are only playing to not even their own, what used to be the full Republican coalition, but a very narrow part of that coalition. We see it again today as J.D. Vance is trying to criticize Tim Walz for speaking about his family's journey with fertility. It's an argument that they see as making no effort to expand beyond their coalition, and they see that as an immense opportunity